Hey, I want to take a moment today to answer a question that I received inside of an email the other day. It says here, "Hey Yankee, how are you feeling? I have a quick question. If you are a 9mm guy, is there ever a reason to carry a full-sized handgun other than to compensate for a tiny pecker? With modern 9mm pistols being available in, they said, such small and easy to carry models," I don't know what they're thinking of, but I think they mean such small and easy to carry models, like the P938, why would anyone need a full-size gun? Would it have any real advantages over the tiny gun in a world where gunfights almost always involve less than 3 shots being fired? Please do not feel the need to make a video. I know your face needs rest. Well, no amount of rest is going to do my face any good, so I thought I'd take a moment here to answer that question. As you can see here, I have one of those little tiny guns they were talking about, the little 938, the one they specifically mentioned. And this gun is super tiny. Seeing it next to a full-size gun really shows you how small it is. Especially the back profile here, which is the hard part to conceal when you're carrying a gun. These guns are much smaller. Now the premise of the question, if I understand it correctly, is if this gun fires the same round as the bigger guns, would there be any need to have the bigger gun, since now these tiny guns are as potent a caliber as many of the full-size guns, specifically when it comes to 9mm? Would the size alone be enough of an advantage to make it to where you never needed a full-size gun, since you had a gun this size, easy to carry, in the same caliber? Now, I think most people know I prefer a more full-size carry gun. I don't like tiny little carry guns, don't care for them. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, that's just to compensate for your tiny pecker. No, not just. There are other reasons also. I think other than being small, the tinier guns have absolutely no advantages over a full-size gun. I don't even think being small is an advantage. In fact, I think the disadvantage of being small outweighs the advantage of it being small. The advantage being that it's easy to carry, but I think every other disadvantage of that size makes full-size guns make even more sense for concealed carry. Now, before I go on to talk about the other physical advantages of the full-size gun, I want to talk about the fallacy that there's somehow even an equivalence here simply because they're the same caliber. Just because you can put the same rounds in each of them doesn't mean you're getting the same performance from each of them. So the small 9mm are not equivalent to the larger 9mm when it comes to ballistics. The shorter barrels on these small guns just don't give you the full potential of the round like the larger barrels on full-size guns. That extra barrel there gets you more towards the peak of that performance for that round. So the smaller guns have a huge disadvantage when it comes to ballistics. It's not a disadvantage that makes them useless, but they are not equal. So pretending they're equal is a fallacy. But let's go on and talk about the physical difference here, and let's kind of pretend that the rounds are kind of equal. But even if you pretend the round would be equal out of both guns, you still have to look at capacity a little bit, because the larger gun, look at that grip, has got a lot more room for ammunition. So there's going to be a lot more rounds in the larger gun. And even if capacity is not something you're worried about, I've never been sold on the idea that I have to have a super high capacity gun. Even if you're not worried about capacity, the larger guns still do have a lot more capacity. With the 17 round here from the Beretta, the 17 round magazine, when you compare it to like the 6 round mag you get with a lot of the smaller guns, that's going to take a whole lot more extra mags if you want to carry the same amount of ammo. If you carry 1 extra mag with this gun, you're looking at, 35 rounds of ammunition. If you want to have that much from a gun like this, you pretty much got to carry like 6 magazines. Everything else being equal, a small gun like this or the 938 is going to conceal very easily, even more so than 938 since it's thinner. But that's it. That's the only advantage. And I don't think ease of concealment should be your #1 criteria for choosing a gun unless you have no other choice. Unless you work somewhere like in an office or somewhere where you can't be seen with a gun, or you're taking a huge risk if you get seen with your gun, then maybe a pocket gun or a super concealable micro gun might be for you. But that's not a situation where it makes it the ideal gun. That makes it a niche gun that should only be used if you don't have other options. When you have other options, the full-size gun is better in every way. For one, like I said, the size. It might be harder to conceal, but it makes the gun itself so much easier to handle. It's so much easier to get a full grip on the gun. It's so much easier to manipulate the gun, point the gun in the right direction. It's just a much easier gun to handle because you got more real estate to put your paws on, and that makes a huge difference with a carry gun. Other than its size, a big advantage some people might think for the smaller guns is weight. I actually don't think the lightweight of these guns is an advantage. I think it's a disadvantage. That lightweight makes it really hard for these guns to manage the recoil of any type of heavy-hitting self-defense ammunition. The full-size guns are just heavier and absorb recoil better. They have more mass. They have more contact between the gun and your hand. They just handle recoil so much better, making them far easier to shoot accurately. So the lightweight of the smaller guns isn't an advantage at all as far as I'm concerned. I think I would rather overcome the weight of the better, heavier gun with a good gun belt and a good holster than I would have to deal with the extra snappiness and inability to control the smaller gun. Another advantage of the bigger gun is it's more accurate. The sights are usually better on the larger gun because they have more room to put nice sights on there. But even when you have nice sights like these SIG night sights, the sight radius is so small that any variance in lining it up is going to make a bigger difference when you hit your target. With the larger guns, often you have more visible sights, and even if you don't have more visible sights, the radius is longer. Therefore, you have a little bit more leeway in how perfectly aligned you are back here, and it makes less of a distance out at the target. So that longer sight radius on a full-size gun or a larger gun is a big advantage over a tiny gun. Now, not only are the smaller guns less able to handle felt recoil and just harder to handle in general due to their small size, their small components, etc., they're also more prone to failure. Whenever something smaller has smaller tolerances, it's harder to make it work accurately every time. Now, I'm not saying that small guns are unreliable because most of them are very reliable, but when it comes to wear and use and able to fit them properly, a larger gun has an advantage. It's far easier to build a gun this size from the ground up and make it function perfectly than it is a smaller, like I said, tighter, more intricate gun. So that's another advantage to the size of the full-size guns. And that kind of brings us to when you do actually have a failure with a small gun or a large gun, the large gun has a huge advantage. Controls on smaller guns tend to be smaller. They're harder to manipulate, especially if you're under duress or your hands are sweaty. And not only are they smaller and harder to use, they tend to be a little stiffer. Because they're smaller parts, they have to be a little more rugged than the larger parts on full-size guns. So to keep them from wearing out as fast, they have to be a little more rugged, a little stiffer in general. So that's two big disadvantages to the small gun when it comes to manipulating the controls if you ever have a failure. And the other one is just manipulating the slide. Since it is smaller, tighter, etc., the springs are usually tighter in the small guns, it's harder to manipulate the slide, once again, especially under duress or with sweaty hands. With the larger gun, the controls are bigger. There's more real estate to get your fingers on, especially if they're sweaty. They're easier to use. They're more intuitive usually, and they're smoother. So if you're under duress, you got sweaty hands, etc., they're just going to be easier to use. And plus, the bigger slides are much easier to get a hold of, much easier to rack if you have to clear a failure. So in the end, not only do small guns not make big guns obsolete, they actually point out the strengths of the bigger guns. It shows you why you should carry as big a gun as you can carry. They're just better at everything. They handle recoil better. They're easier to control. They're easier to use under duress. They're more reliable. If there's a malfunction, it's easier to clear. They're just better in every way other than size. And size is something that I hope you don't have to base your concealed carry pistol on. I hope that's not your main criteria. I hope everyone is comfortable carrying and confident carrying and capable enough while carrying to conceal a full-size gun, because you are far better off in every way to have a full-size gun over one of these micros. These micros are just a compromise for people that have to compromise. If you don't have to compromise, don't carry one. There's not much use for them really. But if you're someone that does have to compromise, well, then it's a good thing they're around. Carry one. But at all other times, Carry as much gun as you possibly can.
Oops.
Go ahead. Hit some lady at 46 South Rose. 46 South Rose.
Station 1 call, retone that please.
10-4.
Captain 4 to go to that location also. This is 1-9, is that correct?